Awesome. I think we may have another couple of folks coming in, but I think we can go ahead and get started. Um, Thank you all for joining here. And I am excited to be here with Catherine Lee, where we'll be doing a customer spotlight on Okta. We've had the pleasure of working together for the past year or so in a variety of capacities, helping them optimize their networking. And, you know, a number of you have probably seen me before if you've attended one of these. My name is Dennis. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Lightyear. Have been doing this for about 5.5 years, where we aim to be the telecom operating system for businesses, helping them save time and money on their network. And I'm here with the wonderful Catherine Lee. Catherine, would you mind giving the audience a little bit of detail on yourself and your role?
Sure. Thanks, Dennis. So I am a staff infrastructure engineer at Okta. I've been in IT for a number of years now. My original focus was on applications, and then I moved to systems engineering, and infrastructure has been my focus for the last several years. My current role includes implementation, engineering, and operational support for physical and cloud environments on Okta's business technology team, with a large focus on deploying our physical spaces globally.
Awesome. Thank you for that outline. And we're going to dig in a lot more into the specifics of that as we go through this discussion. So, in the context of this whole session, I'm going to lead just a structured conversation with Catherine, exploring Okta and Okta's networking footprint, some of the pain points faced there, and their experience working with Lightyear today. And in the context of this, I'm sure a number of folks here may have questions. If you do have questions, please utilize the chat Q&A function to share any questions, and we'll aim to get to those at the end of the webinar. So please do not hesitate to ask questions. And if you can't pay attention throughout the entire thing, we will share a recording with you via email after the webinar ends. So with that, we can go ahead and get started. And I think perhaps a good starting point, just to set the stage before getting into pain points or Lightyear, it'd be good to just understand the scale and scope of network infrastructure for Okta. What type of services are you purchasing? What are the uses of those services, and just the size of the footprint?
Sure. Yeah. So Okta is mainly a cloud-first business. So for our customer-facing infrastructure, we leverage cloud providers, but Okta does have locations throughout the world in various countries for our employees to work and gather. During the pandemic, Okta stopped all construction on physical spaces, like most companies did. As we came out of the pandemic, Okta decided to start reinvigorating its existing physical spaces in preparation for employees to return. Okta is thankfully not a forced return to office yet, but there is a focus on making it a desirable place for employees to gather. So our workplace team wants to design each location to be able to scale well, to be able to handle the wide range of activities that each site hosts, and also make sure that our offices are great places, to come to work. Like the phrase I've heard, you have to earn the employee's commute, right? Especially if you're not the return to office. In general, we have around 15 locations around the world with networking. And on average, we add about 2 to 3 locations per year of various sizes.
Got it. Really helpful. So it sounds like majority offices there, and I'm guessing you have a lot of employees gathering, working out of there. Is there any additional context you can share on just the business impact of Okta's network? For example, would downtime cause lost productivity? Does redundancy and resiliency matter? And any additional detail you can share there?
Yes, absolutely. Redundancy is very important. But backing up for a second, most of our telecom and networking is on our corporate side, servicing our employees. The average employee, probably doesn't think about the corporate network on a regular basis. I know I didn't earlier in my career, of course, until there's a problem, right? Also, I might be biased, but I think that network is one of the most critical resources at an office outside of maybe power. For example, let's say the internet went down, during a business day. Employees can't use conference rooms for Zoom meetings, which might be one of the main reasons why they went in that day. And employees don't want to use hotspot on their phone. They might, try to kill some time, stick around, see if maybe it'll come back up. But after too long, most employees would just give up on leave, right? And what if worse? What if it's not just a typical day in the office? What if a department is having an on-site? Maybe they flew in employees from around the country or around the globe, and the internet went out. They better have some trust fall exercises or something planned, right? Or another situation, we have a variety of customers and prospective customers that come on site at our various locations, like our executive briefing center in San Francisco or our customer experience center in New York. It obviously wouldn't be a great impression if the network went down. And also, our physical locations host a variety of meetings that are critical to Okta's public image, including city tours that host a large number of customers on site. We also host our board of directors meetings in the office and also earnings calls. So again, imagine if the network went down during any of those. So back to your question, Dennis, short answer, a fault in the network could have a substantial business impact.
Got it. Great to know. And not unlike the circumstances faced by a lot of IT leaders we work with, it sounds like for Okta, which is, of course, like last I checked, something like a $15 billion market capitalization company, very large operation. I would guess networking is maybe a tiny cost in the context of the operation, but the overall just importance of network is way, way beyond cost. And yeah, you may not get a lot of kudos day to day when things are working, but sort of like a lot of people knocking on your door when things aren't working. And on that note, could you share a little bit of detail on the team that you work within? I'm sure the IT organization is large, but maybe networking may be a subset. Who beyond you is responsible for network?
Yeah. So out of the IT org, which at Okta we call business technology or BT, so you might hear me say that, the corporate network team is pretty small. We're a dedicated small group. The BT org is about 200 people globally, and our corporate network team, we're just 5 people. So because we are a small team, we share the responsibilities, including architecture, engineering, operations, deployment, security, etc. We also run the global VPN and networking in our cloud environments. And we also physically travel to do the installs and turn-ups for new locations, as well as, like everyone else in the space, it's important to stay abreast of technology trends and testing and evaluating new tools. And just bottom line, Okta is a security company. So it's important that we are constantly evaluating, monitoring, and adapting to the threat landscape.
Got it. Okay, super helpful. So a small team handling the responsibility in aggregate. And I just thought that whole structure was fun because I think the IT organization within really any large company is oftentimes just a black box to the outside world. And for people interested in learning about these organizations, I love hearing about how different functions and such are structured. So that was great setting the stage. So it sounds like networking is very important for Okta, and you have a small team managing what is quite important. And also, we know that networking also involves a good deal of pain, unfortunately. Could you talk a little bit about how you are handling before Lightyear things like circuit procurement, circuit inventory, and billing?
Of course. So before Lightyear, we probably handled those things like a lot of people do it, a lot of manual work, manually reaching out to circuit providers or paying a premium to leverage a circuit aggregator, which can be difficult, if you're going into a new region or a country, which means you're starting from scratch. We could reach out to the landlords, for example, but they usually don't have good answers for us because sometimes they don't know what carriers are on net in their building. Dennis, can I tell you a painful story about one of the most frustrating circuit procurement experiences I've had?
Love to hear it.
Okay. So we were opening a new location in a country that we didn't have a physical location before, and we didn't speak the language. So we tried to leverage their US entity. I tried to submit a services inquiry form on their website, which seems to be the only way to start the quoting process. But that form kept erroring out. I tried over several days, kept erroring out. So I kind of took a break. I revisited the website about a week later. And finally, I was able to get the services inquiry form just to submit. I waited several weeks, still got no response outside of the initial, automated response from the website, like, we received your inquiry, like someone will reach out to you. Yeah, still no response, several weeks. Luckily, throughout this process, I was able to start working with a different carrier, but I was still looking to add a secondary circuit for redundancy, like we were talking about before. Redundancy is really important. But back to the original carrier, I still was not getting any response. So I went back to the website and I found that the website had been completely redesigned. So I was thinking, okay, maybe, maybe my submitted form got lost in the redesign. So I submitted a new services inquiry form. I finally heard back from them a year after the location opened. Someone finally reached out to me about the services inquiry form I had submitted.
Wow. So, I think that's a good way to, that probably summarizes the type of work that you had to put in to handle telecom procurement and inventory. And I do love hearing stories like that, but unfortunately, there are just too many of them to count these days. So I think that ties really well into my next question, which is really, what are your primary pain points in each area? It sounds like one core pain point that you just touched on is likely just you have to do a lot of manual groundwork that's not always glamorous to get things done. For example, like filling out forms and waiting a year perhaps. And also that vendors are not the most proactive in getting back to you. Any other sort of core pain points you'd summarize in your experience dealing with ISPs?
Yeah, definitely, like you said, all the manual processes and follow-ups and waiting is definitely painful. Just the amount of time that we waste on administrative inefficient tasks is excruciating, especially when you're trying to find carriers for a new location address can be difficult, and oftentimes the project timeline might be short, and then it's even more stressful. Having to manually get competitive quotes from multiple vendors. So just, multiply that effort times. You want to be competitive. You want to make sure you're doing your due diligence. But yeah, obviously chasing down potential vendors, but also inventory management. So when I joined Okta, there wasn't a dedicated network team, and the documentation and the repository and the inventory management wasn't in a great place. So that made it difficult to start off from. So we spent a lot of time chasing down contract terms and other details, and to set up our inventory management.
Got it. Helpful. And from this conversation, you can probably glean I like to quantify impact. Are there any specific either details or anecdotes you can share regarding just the time or cost impact of some of these pains that you faced?
I can't give you specific metrics, but just in general, the time saved that Lightyear has afforded us is just amazing. We're engineers. We want to focus on engineering work, which we enjoy. And also it's moving the business forward. It's moving our goals forward, like I was talking about earlier. So that is the biggest impact for us. Lightyear helps eliminate the administrative burden, and honestly, the annoying aspects of telecom procurement and other administrative functions related to network engineering.
Got it. Super helpful. And one thing that you touched on that is worth just like digging into, and I'm curious if you agree, is basically just the notion of the double-edged sword of working with an aggregator in particular. We have many aggregator partners, and I don't want to sit here and say that aggregators are bad to work with. However, there are benefits and drawbacks. I think sometimes people view something like Lightyear and may understand, oh, you know what, I could just use an aggregator, or I don't need something like Lightyear because I use an aggregator. And we work with a lot of aggregator partners that do their job well. However, the thing is, when you're buying either resold or type 2 network, um, on the positive end, the pitch sounds great on paper, as in, oh, I have one throat to choke for quoting, for installs, for support, and theoretically my inventory and bill payment experience should be organized and optimized, which sounds great when they're selling it to you. But on the other side, the reality is a bit different in the sense, from a quoting and pricing perspective, getting redundancy and diversity may be hard on a true perspective, given the nature of what carriers they're reselling and whether or not they're sharing TMZ data, this, that, and the other. You will pay a premium to work with an aggregator, and that may be fair for some of the costs you save. Implementations and troubleshooting, though, when you're communicating an issue to a vendor who's then communicating and dealing with that issue with another vendor, there is an operational cost there that is very real, especially if things like uptime matter. Time to resolution is more difficult. So, I'd be curious if you'd agree with that, assessment of the double-edged sword of the aggregator in that sense. And I'm sure people who are listening to this may have opinions on this as well.
Yes, absolutely. Again, I also, I don't want to say that all aggregators are like this, but I've definitely worked with some aggregators that, like you said, benefits on paper, but it's painful in practice, and, I'll admit when I first heard about Lightyear, some of those similar thoughts flash through my mind, right? Like, how are they different than an aggregator? It's just adding another layer between us and the circuits. But it's actually the opposite. So circuit aggregators add more time in a lot of instances. Like you said, if there's an issue with the circuit, you have to go through the aggregator. You can't contact the circuit provider directly. Whereas Lightyear, they're like, especially, okay, let me talk about implementation. So implementations in the past been another pain point, especially with aggregators, again, where they add that layer, and I haven't seen much value from some of them. But Lightyear, when we did our first implementation with Lightyear, it was like night and day. I don't have to babysit, which is something that I've had to do in the past, and that can be excruciating. And again, huge waste of time. Whereas Lightyear, the implementation managers are focused, dedicated, attentive, and I've now learned that, when Lightyear is doing an installation for us, they're on top of it. They're faster than even I can be, because they're focused on fulfilling our needs and getting us properly installed by the time we've said so. So, in contrast, again, with aggregators, it just tends to be another person you have to follow up from, or a relayed message that, again, adds more time to the process.
No, super helpful. And that leads really well into sort of like the next question. Could you go into maybe a little bit more detail then about, so we have the stage set on the organization, some of the pains you're facing and what you had to deal with, what led you to Lightyear, and maybe we could talk through just your storyline to date in working with Lightyear.
Yeah, of course. So after, all those painful things I've mentioned and the several challenges trying to procure circuits, especially in new regions, we as a team, we decided we could either grin and bear it, or we could try to find a better path forwards. And that's when the leader of the network team, Chris Carlson, suggested that we bring Lightyear in to help us, as he had used them at a previous organization.
Awesome. Yeah. And we're big fans of Chris because Chris was actually at a previous company, Lime, which is now, I believe, owned by Uber. He was actually one of our earliest customers. So big fans of Chris.
Awesome. And then just to like add on to that, the initial contact was great. Our account rep was not at all pushy. He thoroughly understood, our pain points, because I'm pretty sure they're pretty common. And just, calmly is like, this is what Lightyear can do. And then we took a chance, and glad we did.
Um, Awesome. And yeah, can you dig into a little bit of just some of the projects that started off early and how that developed over time in working with Lightyear? It sounds like primarily on some circuit, yeah, I think individual circuits to start.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first time that we used Lightyear, we were opening a new international location and we were dreading some of those pain points I described. And then, based on Chris's suggestion, we reached out to Lightyear. And like I said, the team was so wonderful to work with right from the start. We decided we were gonna ease into our relationship with Lightyear and see how Okta could benefit. So we procured one circuit through Lightyear, and we leveraged an existing relationship for the other circuit. But throughout the process, throughout that installation, from procurement through completed installation, the side-by-side comparison between Lightyear and the other vendor was just night and day. It was so amazing, and it just reinforced why Lightyear was a good choice. Being able to quote from multiple providers really quickly. They get back to you really quickly, and any quotes that don't get back, sometimes within a day or two, there'll be a status showing, it's out, or they're waiting to hear back, or it's being drafted. So it's really valuable to have that transparency, but then also having them project manage the circuit install is amazing. So like I said, the installation managers are wonderful. They're focused, driven, attentive. Other installations have been painful, and we've wasted a decent amount of time through like repetitive emails, chasing updates, sometimes having inefficient vendor meetings, sometimes, having to go through a circuit aggregator, so it's even more inefficient. But one thing I love about working with the Lightyear installation team is that, again, they're very transparent and they are very proactive. If there's any change, there's an installation status that they'll update, and they always keep in sight the requested delivery date. And so if there's any risk to that delivery date, no matter what side is causing the risk, they're very clear about it, and they are, again, focused on mitigating it and getting you back to on track.
Awesome. Obviously music to my ears to hear some of these things. Um, and I know also more recently, so you started off primarily focusing on circuit procurement, internationally and domestically with us. And more recently, you became a customer of our bill consolidation service to address some of the bill payment issues. Any context there and any sort of early insights you've gleaned?
Yeah. So billing has definitely been another pain point. I should have mentioned that earlier. Our portfolio before Lightyear was a variety of circuit providers, like a few aggregators, and each month, like chasing down the invoices, verifying that they're correct, and making sure that they get paid properly and on time, making sure they follow our invoicing and billing processes correctly so they can get paid, was another huge time waste for me and the team, honestly. So yeah, just given the success that we had with Lightyear's procurement and installation services, it made total sense, to try this bill consolidation service as well. So we are still in the process of implementing, but it's going really well so far. And I look forward to the additional time and cost savings that we're going to get from it. Because, again, instead of having to chase down numerous invoices and, track the progress, versus receiving one invoice from Lightyear that they compiled and they took care of chasing and conducting the initial review for accuracy is going to be amazing. Because, again, back to the horror story, issues with payments can cause, a temporary disconnect. I have experienced that in the past, where, a billing issue happens, and yeah. And that's pretty scary because when, when you're on call as a network engineer and, you get paged, there's an issue with the circuits. My first instinct is not to think about billing. It's to think about maybe something's wrong, with our equipment, or maybe the circuit itself, maybe someone cut the fiber in the street or something. But now I've learned my lesson, and I do move billing higher in the troubleshooting priority. But yeah, but we won't have to worry about that now that Lightyear is taking over the billing consolidation.
Awesome. Yeah, nothing hurts more, I'm sure, than an outage that's not even caused by a fault with the circuit. Um,
Yeah.
but beside the point, sort of like as a closing point on this section before we move to Q&A, since working with Lightyear, could you just like in short summarize what you think has been most valuable to you? I think um, touched on this earlier, but any metric specifics to help tell the story.
The most valuable thing is the time savings. Again, back to our initial meetings with Lightyear and our account rep, again, wasn't pushy, just was like, matter of fact, we're going to save you a lot of time. And it's like, all right, we'll see. But it's so true. Like, we've saved so much time, and that has been the most valuable thing. Again, saving time, not having to chase down circuit providers in the procurement process, saving time during the installation, not having to babysit, trusting that Lightyear will make sure that we get it installed correctly and on time. And then now the billing consolidation.
Awesome. Much appreciated. And now we can get to a couple of questions before we close out here. And I would like to remind anyone, if you do have any questions, please do use the Q&A function, and we will attempt to get to your questions here. There was an anonymous attendee who asked a question that I will avoid directly answering. There was a question, can you share some of the aggregators that were painful? And that's a fair question. I don't want us to badmouth any specific vendors here. However, a little bit of detail that I will just quickly share, because we work with tons of aggregators and tons of customers that utilize aggregators. The note will say it's actually not one specific aggregator. It is more about utilizing a vendor within their area of competence. So what I mean by that is different aggregators are either reselling or purchasing type 2 or even type 3 different circuits from different providers. And for example, if you're buying services from an aggregator where they have in a geography where they have few vendor relationships or weak vendor relationships, you're potentially likely to pay a higher price or have a worse experience. It's also likely that sometimes when you buy from an aggregator, if you don't know who they're actually reselling from, you may get a circuit that requires construction and is not going to be project managed properly in an area where you could get primary access from a carrier that you could buy from directly that requires no construction. And these are the types of things where exposing the data underlying who has infrastructure will make a big difference. And it's less so that like, oh, one aggregator is bad and one aggregator is great. Just like all ISPs, like buying a service from AT&T as an example, you can have a dramatically different experience depending on where you buy. And it's all about sort of like optimizing what you buy with data. That's at least my opinion. I don't know if Catherine, you have an opinion on that particular question in aggregate.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's not that one particular aggregator just sucks in general. There's a lot of factors, like you said, like the geo of where the circuit is, how many layers they're going through. Yeah, the quality. So I agree with what you said, Dennis. Yeah.
One other question that we got here is, do you utilize any AI tooling in your network engineering workflows at all today? And or do you have peers where you're seeing interesting use cases of AI in the network engineering workflow? It's a very topical question, so I'm curious if you're doing or seeing anything of interest.
Oh, like everyone, I'm pretty excited about AI. For one reason, AI is helping network engineering evolve by removing legacy connectivity, such as MPLS clouds, and quickly evolving to only be DIA type circuits or point-to-point type circuits with or without SDN overlays. So gone are the days, you reach out to a single MPLS carrier to procure connectivity, no matter where you may be expanding to. And now it's about finding cheap and reliable internet connectivity with a quality vendor, or in more special cases, point-to-point circuits. So while this simplifies some things, it complicates others, especially around finding circuit providers and circuit procurements. But AI is helping in areas, especially SDN, which can help you get the most benefits out of your telecom infrastructure. Yeah. Dennis, you probably talked to other customers about how they're using AI in their space. Like, do you have any details you can share on that?
Yeah, so definitely an area with a lot of excitement where there are a lot of things that are theorized, not yet a ton in practice that I am seeing. But sort of to your point, all the various software-oriented networking players like the SD-WAN players and even some of the hardware players that embed software in their services are trying to utilize AI to sort of self-optimize network and ideally make the job of a network engineer easier and more strategic. So like things that I've seen that are not yet deeply in practice, but very talked about by these vendors are things like the notion of utilizing AI to analyze your traffic and optimize your network live or predict problems, or at least automatically troubleshoot problems, or even one easier step is just like at least automatically create tickets for support. And I see like varied levels of this in practice. One thing that we're doing at Lightyear is like we are utilizing AI tool in the context of our backend, as you're aware, managing circuit implementations, quoting, and things of that nature, just tons of back and forth with vendors. That requires a lot of just hounding and interaction to get things done. We are utilizing AI tooling today to just automate components of that and make sure that we're responsive, on time, and accurate with what we share. And also, we also use it for helping predict pricing outcomes and things of that nature.
Okay.
And
I totally agree. AI can be used to analyze network data, predict traffic patterns, spot potential issues early on, and then also, like you were saying, just in general, automating repetitive tasks, removing that from our manual workload, right? So we can focus on the bigger picture.
absolutely. And I think just one last one here from the audience that's more Lightyear related. Can you quantify what sort of savings from a percentage perspective that you have seen using Lightyear?
I don't have specific metrics, but one thing I love, again, is the transparency. So another thing that we're going through right now is we are working with our Lightyear rep to evaluate our current portfolio. And, based on how much time is left in the contract, what our current MRC is, they have done an analysis. They've gone out, gotten, quotes, pricing for us, and just a side by side, like this is what you're currently paying. And with a similar circuit, this is what you could be paying. And here are the cost savings. And just seeing that, like in a spreadsheet, and then the total amount, it's absolutely in the thousands.
Awesome. Once again, music to my ears. And the things that we cite to customers, obviously not coming from Catherine, but this is from me. So like, take this with a grain of salt if you believe that I'm biased, which I totally am. But the metrics that we cite that we often get validated in customer engagements are 20% cost savings, 60 to 70% time savings, and that hopefully the time that you spend on network moves less from the plumbing component of engineering into more of the thinking and strategic component of networking, which I think for most people is the more exciting part. So that's hopefully what we like to put out there. And I believe that is the end of our questions. So as we close out here, I just want to give a major thank you to Catherine for joining us, sharing her story with us. And it's also worth noting, she said great things about Lightyear, but it's a two-way street. Catherine's one of the easiest to work with customers that we have out there. So couldn't sing more praises about her. So thank you for sharing your story, Catherine. And for the audience here, we will share this recording with you after the fact. If you are interested in anything Lightyear related, you can, reply to the email that you get that should have some instructions on how to get in touch, or just visit us at lightyear.ai.
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you, everyone.
Yep. Thank you. See you.